The time is now 1:35 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Corpus Christi B Corporation, also known as the Type B Board. We'll start with roll call. Ms. Huerta?
President Scott Harris.
Present.
Robert Themis. Diana Summers.
Here.
Leah Oliveri. Lee Trujillo. Mr. Trujillo? Mr. Trujillo, are you online?
Here.
Okay, thanks. John Balls?
Here.
Alan Wilson?
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum present to conduct the meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. Item C on the agenda is public comment. Would anyone like to make a public comment on any of the items on the agenda at this time? Or any other items? Any public comment? Okay, hearing or seeing none. We don't do written comment anymore,
We're
right?
still taking them, but we have
Okay.
not received any.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to item D on the agenda, which is approval of minutes for the meeting we had on May 17th, our regular board meeting on May 17th. Are there any discussion items or revisions to that? Has everybody had a chance to look at that? And do we have a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Tamez, second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Say no? Okay. And the motion passes. Item E on the agenda is the financial report. Ms. Heather?
Good afternoon, Board Chairman Heather Holbert, Director of Finance. Pull this up real fast. Okay, we're ready to go. So this is the financial statements for the 8 months ending May 31st, 2021. We began the year with a fund balance of $7.9 million. We've collected $5.1 million revenues to date. We have committed or spent $5 million in expenditures year to date, and our ending fund balance as of May 31st is $7.9 million. This is the cumulative balance for the affordable housing, the economic development, and the streets portion of Type B. So to look at the affordable housing, we have one outstanding commitment with Salvation Army that we are now expecting to pay out in 2023. And so we expect to end the year with a $1.7 million fund balance in affordable housing. For economic development, we have committed to this year for Cole Park Pier, for the USO of South Texas, and the South Texas Botanical Gardens, for a total of about 5.3, almost 5.4 million, and we estimate that we will end the year in with a $5 million fund balance. And then for the streets, we had a $3 million commitment for Ocean Drive reconstruction. That leaves us with a small fund balance of about $300,000. Next year in 2022, the streets will reimburse the Economic Development Fund for the transfer that occurred in 2020. And then that loan will be fully paid at that point in time. And then looking at our sales tax, we have provided the forecast for the last 3 months. So the numbers that are in red are what we're forecasting for collections. But we are anticipating that we will probably end the year with a surplus of about $500,000 over what we had budgeted. When we went into the budget time period, that was during COVID, we weren't sure exactly what to budget, so budget did a very conservative outlook. We have exceeded the majority of the months what that budget was, and so we do anticipate that we will end the year with $500,000 or more over budget than what was in collections. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Do we have any questions on the financial reports from the board? Robert? No? Any questions from Lee or Diana? Okay.
Okay,
Hearing none, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, seeing we have no closed session items on the agenda, we'll move on to item G, which is our regular agenda items. We'll start with 3. G3, which is our investment policies and strategies. Go ahead.
Hi again. So this is the item for every year per the Public Funds Investment Act. Each governing body has to adopt the investment policy, investment strategy. So these are set at the council level, and then as a corporation, the city provides services, investment services for the management of cash for the Type A and Type B. And so there are just a couple of changes that are going to be made within the investment policy, investment strategy. The primary thing is that we are removing the collateralization requirement at the recommendation of our investment advisor. So because the Type A and Type B are a corporation and not technically a governmental entity, the collateralization is not required and actually not recommended. The banks, the financial institutions really are backing away if that's not required because it does tie up a portion of their assets. And so, like I said, per the recommendation of our investment advisor, we are removing that collateralization requirement for the Type A and actually the Type B and Type A investment policy. So, do you have any questions on that? And we had actually planned on bringing this to the Type A board, but it inadvertently got left off the agenda, so you'll only hear it once today, and then we will bring it back at a later date.
Does this conclude?
This does conclude
Okay.
my presentation.
Board comments or questions? Mr. Wilson?
There was something in there about repurchase agreements too, wasn't there?
I believe that had to do with it has to do with the collateralization too.
Yeah.
It's just removing that collateralization piece of it. And we don't participate in any repurchase agreements. It is allowable under the Public Funds Investment Act, but currently that's not something that the city engages in.
So the corporation, if it had more than 250,000 in a particular institution, would have some exposure.
Yes,
If
there
it
would be
was-
exposure.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's what the collateralization does, is it removes that exposure, but it's not, it's
not required.
not required because it is a corporation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve our investment policy and strategy for fiscal year 21-22.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Did Ms. Summers, did you say aye?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, any opposed, say no. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, government investment
Aye.
pools. Oh, that was a late aye, but we got it. Thanks, Lee. Government investment pools. Go ahead.
Hi, Heather Hilbert again. So the city is always constantly looking to make sure that we're diversifying our investments, and the PFIA allows for local government pools, which are kind of like money markets for governmental entities and special districts that can invest their money in that. We utilize a couple of already existing ones, but we did want to add a third investment pool. This provides us, each investment pool has their own investment strategies and what they invest in, and so we feel like it is a good practice to have a variety of choices on where we can move our money around. So we are recommending that we add the Texas Class and the Texas Class Government Investment Pools. This item went to the investment committee, and they did unanimously recommend that this be brought forward for consideration by both council, the Type A and the Type B. So that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Heather. Any questions from the board?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a motion. Thanks, Lee. We got you. We've got a motion to approve an amendment to our guidelines and criteria for granting business incentives. We'll hear staff presentation at this time.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Randy Almaguer, Senior Management Analyst. Chair, board members, how you doing today? Good? Okay. So this motion to approve these guidelines is to help facilitate the application process in an efficient manner consistent with city's goals of promoting economic growth, economic development within the city. So within this, these guidelines, it's to incorporate really at the beginning phase of that application process that if an applicant's submitting that application with the EDC, starting to incorporate the city and city staff, city manager, city staff in that process. So you get that proper vetting from the beginning to the end. Really what we're doing is just continuing those open lines of communications. What this does is better serve the Type B board, bringing forth good projects for approval. So what you also will see there in those red line changes is, once this application is vetted, city manager, staff, EDC will sit down. It'll go through to the EDC Board of Trustees. And at that time as well, any board member can support that project or object to that project. So that's just another step in there. Also, in the quarterly reports, which Mr. Culberson does on a quarterly basis, we'll include that extra slide on any applications or applicants that were denied and the reason why, again, just to bring that clear picture to the board as what's going on. You see all the ones that are coming to you for approval, but you also see what didn't make it. So that concludes my presentation. Stand by for any questions.
And Chair, can I add one thing to that?
Yes, sir.
Since we wrote this, and I didn't get a chance to talk to Randy about it, but under the section 12 where it talks about providing a courtesy copy to the city manager and city staff, we'd also ask that a courtesy copy be provided to the mayor and the mayoral appointee to the EDC Board of Directors at the same time. They're both on the EDC, and so it would be a courtesy copy to them as well, in addition to the manager and the appropriate city staff.
Okay.
And that one would require a floor amendment, so we'd need to do a motion to amend
Okay.
with that, to include that.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the process of going through the EDC with applications. And then the EDC board, we have city manager on the board, right? You're on the EDC board, or
Yes, I am.
as an official or ex-official?
It's
Are
an
you voting?
ex-official, non-voting member.
Non-voting
Right.
member?
Yeah, the mayor and the mayoral appointee are voting members.
Okay.
Yep.
What are we, well, let me open it up to board I just want to know exactly it doesn't sound like, I don't know what we're changing here then if.
Well, what we're changing is to get the city executives in the loop, basically. So we don't know anything about the application until it gets to the EDC board. And we want to be knowledgeable about it before it gets there. We won't be making any recommendations or weighing in on it. It's just so we can know what is the application, what's the project, before we sit at the EDC and hear a presentation on it.
So there's no recommendations for forwarding it to the EDC board or to the type A or B
No.
board from the city staff? It's the same process, except all it is a communication.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's a communication fix. That's what this is. So
Okay.
we know very little about it, but we feel we should. I know the type B and type A control the sales tax, but we see it as part of the city. And so we just want to be kind of in the know. We want to know what the application is. We're not going to vet it or weigh in on it. That's the EDC's responsibility that we pay them for.
And I'm assuming we do this because there's been a lack of communication, I guess,
Right.
on your part for
Yes, sir.
something that you may have not have seen.
That's true. Yeah. So
Okay.
a recent application that went through, the first time I heard about it was at the EDC board meeting, and it was a pretty big request. And so we're thinking as professionals, we should have a little bit more information about it before we sit down at the EDC board meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
But it's
open
not
it up
to, and we won't be waging any opinion. We're not going to present any opinion or recommendation. It's just that, just as what you said, it's just so the communication begins with the city officials as it begins with EDC at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, not at the
Okay.
end. Right now, it happens at the end of the process. That's when we find out. We're just saying it'd be nice to know at the beginning.
Okay. I understand. I just needed a little bit of clarity
Yeah,
before
sure.
we open it up for the other
Absolutely.
members. So, okay. Board comments or questions? Ms. Olivari first.
Thank you, Mr. Tony, for clarifying, because, you know, totally understand everything.
Yeah, can you turn your mic on, please?
But what confused me, and it may just be the wording, is if you go to section 2, mission and goals, and there's the third sentence. Once the CCR, with the concurrence of the city manager, I mean, it sounds like to me that is, maybe I'm reading it wrong, and maybe it's just, you know, poorly constructed, but that does mean that you have to approve. It sounds like.
It's not a concurrence that the project is a good project, it's just a concurrence that the application is complete and it's ready to be presented. That's what we're looking for, is a concurrence that it's ready to go to the EDC. Not that it's a good project or that he wants it, or that the city manager wants to support it or not. It says in the next sentence that the city manager can object to it at the meeting if he chooses to do so. As well as the
I can
mayor.
understand that, I just think it's a little awkward somehow. I mean, I don't know how we could rephrase it, so it just seems like to me that there could be not with Mr. Zanoni, because he's here and he knows what was going on, but sometime in the future, there could be a confusion about what that means. Does that mean he has to concur? I understand about application complete and that the magic is in the word complete, but you can always say something isn't complete. I mean, what's complete? You know, it always seems open to subjective review to me.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that was my intent with it, was to make sure it's as clear.
That's why I said, I think it just might be and the only other thing I would ask is when you're doing these, could we get a red line copy? So, you know, we can.
Red line on there.
It doesn't show up.
There was no red line copy provided to
It has
us.
the changes incorporated, but it doesn't show what was changed or added in what I pulled up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Document says red line.
Yeah.
I had to print it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
didn't
it's,
print it.
I think it's when it converted to PDF, so we'll make sure to send you the Word version.
Yeah,
Sometimes when it
that
converts to
okay,
PDF, it
that
clears
makes
the red
sense,
line.
Because I'm like, well, I can't, I'm having a little trouble. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Or I'll print it from now on. Alan was smart enough to print it. I wasn't. That was my only comment on that.
Yeah, and we have, just to, thank you, Ms. Olivari, I have no problem with eliminating that phrase, being with the concurrence of the city manager. We're paying EDC money to vet
Right.
these, so hopefully they know enough to make sure it's complete. And-
I'm sure they want to stay on your good side, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, right. So we can delete that part. Again, it's what the chairman said, this is about just communication. And so that the city, not just me, but the Randy and our finance director, Constance, other city officials that help to manage this program on behalf of the board.
Sure.
That we have a general understanding of what's happening with the application requests.
All with signing whatever it is you need to sign that you'll, you know.
You know, I don't think we have to sign anything. do we?
Well, I mean, in
Yeah.
some of these, there might be non-disclosure.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So whoever sees it, I would think, would need to, you know, hold to the non-disclosure.
Yeah, we don't have any kind of problem with promising confidentiality.
I understand, you do it all the time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Summers is number 2 on my list. Ms. Summers, go ahead.
I think you have the wrong one.
Oh,
I didn't raise my hand.
It's him.
You didn't
They
raise
your
switched.
hand.
Oh, well, I'm.
okay, then
I'm
it's,
interested.
okay. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Appreciate that.
They probably switched it.
So, Peter, is this not being done now? Is there a communication?
It's not being
Yeah.
done now. Yes, that's why we're bringing it. It's not being done now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does it need to be memorialized in a formal document like this? You guys just can't make phone calls to each other and work it out?
I tried that avenue, and Ian suggested we have to change these bylaws, so that's why we're here today. I had sent him a memo that I signed and asked for him to sign it, so there would be a business process understanding.
Okay.
But he felt that this was a better way to go about it.
Well, Ian's here. Ian, I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, Mr. Vacy, if you can, I think the question, maybe you can answer a question by Mr. Valls real quick about
So,
the
there must
process
be-
and how we memorialize it.
Yeah, I mean, there must be a communication gap that both parties feel that it needs to be memorialized in an amended document, and if both parties are okay with it, then,
For the record, Ian Vasey with the CCRADC. There was one project which we at the EDC were informed that the city had been fully briefed, and it's from an organization that we usually know and trust very well. And there was maybe some miscommunication on that one. And is this necessary? I mean, certainly Peter and I talk on a regular basis, and so does Mike. And I think in this case, we could commit that we will be talking. And I mean, when you get to the, institutional memory is a weird little thing. If you remember in 2015, the Type A was coming to a conclusion, and the city council at the time said, we need to switch to a B because we want the money for the roads, and the Type A board at the time, and I know Alan, Leah, you were around, Scott, you were around
I
too.
was probably around when the wagons were here, yeah. uh-huh.
Yeah, and we said, look, we need to fix the road. So that's why it was switched from an A to a B. And then there was that event at the ABC, the EDC board, the Type A board, the city council. And it was, it was designed so that the Type A board wanted their independence to be able to see every project, and not one group can kill things administratively, or not us, not city management, not council, not anybody. There's a process. And I think at the time the council said, well, start it at the EDC, then do the vetting in an impartial, non-city way. And it's nothing to do with city management or anything like that. It was, they're anticipating what happens in the future, what have you. There might be another way to do this. It's kind of an awkward position for us to be in, and there was a glitch. It wasn't so much from us. It wasn't from Peter's people. It was we were all told something a little bit different from somebody on the outside, and we apologize for that, and that's not was anybody's intent. But that's why the system started at the EDC as it did, and then to go to the Type A board that sees all the applications, then goes to the recommendations to the city council. So there's no adversarialness, no nothing like that. This is just how do we all agree on this? And when Peter sent the memo over, it was that's not the policy that was set by the city council at the time. So that's why I couldn't execute my side of it.
okay. I don't know if you helped me or hurt me, but,
I was just giving you some history. I mean, and if you remember,
Water
that's why
land
we
the
did it
plane.
certain
okay. No, I
ways.
appreciate that. I mean, you're getting called out, so I want you to have an opportunity
Yeah, I
to
didn't-
tell your side of the story.
It's just a
I'm-
little bit different than.
Yeah, no, I know. And it's a little confusing, kind of to what Leo's point, with the concurrence, the city manager determines that an application is complete and the recommendations on the application have been finalized. But this other part doesn't make sense to me. The CCREDC, I'm just going to say EDC board, the EDC staff will take a project to the EDC board of trustees for approval. At the EDC board meeting, any board member, including the mayor, the city council representative, and the city manager, may support or object to the project. But that exists now. I mean, they can do that now. So why all that language? And if they're only one vote, they still can be outvoted by the body. I know. Right, he doesn't vote, but, I mean, you have voting capability now, but, you're only one or two or three votes against, I don't know how many people are on that board. You follow me? So,
I think it's just for clarity, so that we're, when we're saying that the city manager has concurred that the item is ready to present, that doesn't necessarily mean that he would get up there and say, this is a wonderful project, everybody support it. He still gets to voice his opinion on it at the at the board meeting. So it was just for clarity to make it, so that nobody's confused if that happens.
So the mousetrap's not working now then, right? I mean, we've been doing it this way for quite a while. And we
I
use
only
him as-
heard there's one project. That's what I
Yeah.
heard.
I mean,
Right.
we've used him as kind of a arm's length transaction
Right,
for
we're
us.
fine with that. It's just, again, this could happen again, right? It happened one time, but it could happen again and again, and it just puts, I think it puts a better policy in place. We could delete, since we're gonna delete the concurrence of the city manager, the rest of that material probably is unnecessary as well. The main thing that we're trying to get is under the application, which is on the second page, application section 12.
Okay.
That providing a courtesy copy to the city manager, the mayor, and the mayoral appointee to the EDC Board of Directors, once they get it, once EDC gets it, to include a conversation about it. Ian and I can have a conversation about it. I think that was written in there somewhere as well.
So what,
Can you,
Right. But we're going to delete the concurrence.
Leah, your
so-
microphone,
so
sorry,
can
we
we
missed
just do
that.
away with section
Yeah.
2 and only use section 12? I mean, one of the things that I've thought of and I don't know where Ian would be on this, but is to have our board president have a seat on the EDC board. That way, we know for sure, and we can blame that person if they're clueless on a project, because everything would have gone through, they would be aware of everything that is being forwarded and that's being rejected.
Just as an
But it would be at not necessarily, because the board chair of this board
Yeah.
wouldn't find out necessarily unless he or she was given a copy of the application.
Right. So
And so-
the board is not board's not made aware of
This
projects?
board.
The EDC board.
Oh, the EDC board? Yeah, they are.
To have our board chair on the EDC board.
But ex
Right.
officio.
But ex
because
officio.
Otherwise,
Your mic.
Right.
it
Right.
is
No.
on two boards, you can't do that.
Push it till it's green.
City council
Push the
can't
button till
appoint
it's
somebody
green.
to two boards.
Oh,
See it?
well, it's ex officio. Sure they can, they
That
appointed
work?
us.
Oh, yeah, here it is. I could tell you that we're not going to take anybody's word again that they've been fully briefed, to be honest. Somebody without naming names, somebody told me and Mike something and said, we're not going to take them at their word anymore. I mean, we're going to make sure everything is fully briefed with Peter, and I mean, it's neither fault of, I don't think it's either fault of, knowing, without speaking in public on what happened, we both, all us, were told that everybody had been fully briefed and they hadn't, and so I get it. We're going to make sure that the communication level is doubled down on and fully vetted, and it's not like we don't speak all the time anyway, so this was just a weird little glitch. Speaking of the EDC, the board chair going on the EDC board, that takes a little bit more of a figuring out with some bylaw changes and some things like that. And the city obviously has, as a $700,000 contributor to the city, 575 from the general fund and 125 from the type A, B, the B fund now, I suppose. The mayor, a council appointee, and then 4 other appointees that the city council appoints, including Mr. Goldston, who's our incoming chairman, who's a city appointee, who's in the audience today. So, I mean, the city's well represented within that group, including Ms. Futrell, who I know was actually the facilitator of that meeting I was talking about at the ABC. So, I mean, the city has good representation on the board of directors.
Well, the city's well represented now, and this slipped through the cracks, so much so that it's coming to us in the form of an amendment.
Yeah, John, I mean,
And one more's not gonna hurt. At least we can hold them accountable.
It triggers other things with other organizations and funding levels, so it's a little bit weirder than that.
Okay.
But, I mean, and again, our apologies on this one. We were told something by here's my boss coming up.
Oh, okay.
Or your brain.
May I talk? Mike Culbertson, I'm the COO. The type A and B has always been this kind of rolling, kind of going stuff. We've had projects brief our board before an application. I mean, that's just, to get a feel for what's going on, for how much people, back it and things like that. The way it usually works is I get contacted either through third party or one of the board, a lot of times one of the board will send somebody to me, and we'll talk, we'll figure out, I'll discuss with Amy whether it's legal or not, whether it falls within, and if it does, and then we kind of start the application process. Application process takes a long time, you know, depending on where we are. I need to know how many people or investment and how much investment it's going to count, you know, if it's inside the city, if it's outside, but in the industrial district, things like that. It's kind of a wide-ranging and moving. At some point, I'll talk with, it used to be Constance, now it's Heather, about budget, but, you know, I go to these meetings like you do, I know what the budget is, I know what, I'm an accountant, I can count to 3.5 million a year, I can do that. And even the state of Texas thinks I can. But, so, if you're asking, is it just a perfect, somebody gives me an application and then we take it kind of thing, it rarely hits that.
So,
I work with city staff all the time. I will grant you, I do not talk to the city manager. Most city managers, I don't think I ever sent one to a city manager before.
so I guess what's being revised here, the issue here, so say you get an application now, before it even goes to your board, say it takes 8-9 months, whatever it takes, the city manager wants to know, as soon as you receive an application, I received an application, and I'm going to begin working with them. It'll go to the board in 5-6 months, but basically what I'm hearing is that initial communication of you receiving, the EDC receiving a package is what the city's not being in the loop on. They're at the board, which may happen 5, 6, 7 months later, but that initial communication is where they're not in the loop on. So how?
But like I
what would you-
said, I'll work for somebody for 4 months before we actually get to an application.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them to submit an application to begin with and say, no, that doesn't work. Okay? We can do it as soon as I hear something. But, you know, I got to tell you, you can talk to Amy, and between us, I mean, one in 5 maybe may see an application.
And you're working with, as soon as you get a application, you're working with Constance and
Yeah.
Heather?
On the
now?
budget, but I know the budget, so as long as it's
Not
not.
necessarily, like in this last case, this example project we're talking about, nobody knew anything in the city.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that's
Constance,
true,
Heather,
that's true.
me.
We worked with the university, we worked with the, you know, we talked with the board.
And it was presented at the EDC board?
It was presented
Yeah.
right at the EDC board. That's the first time we learned about it.
Okay.
Right, so what we're saying is just whenever, it could take 4 months, and maybe an application never materializes, but as soon as the paper copy's in, it's just a matter of hitting send to the city staff.
We can certainly,
That's all we're asking for.
we can submit applications as long as it's not veto power. I mean, if we submit an
There's no
application.
there's no veto language in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on, Leah. Robert, did you have a question?
Just a comment. I'm the senior member of this group here, because I served, this is my second term with the Type A and Type B. And I'm saying from 2008 to 2014, I was a board member, and now in the last 2 years here. I've never have seen a problem with the communication with EDC and staff and legal. Any project that we were brought to us would go through them. And by the time they got to us, we would vote on it. And I haven't seen a problem of lack of communication, except for one, and that was a political one.
Had an AG's opinion too, didn't it?
Yeah, so I don't see why we have to amend anything here. It's been working fine as far as I'm concerned. I individually, we talk to EDC, we talk to staff, and I don't see no problem there, so that's just my opinion.
Thanks, Robert. Ms. Olivari?
I just want to clarify. My understanding is sometimes you just get, I would say, sort of an intent. I want to consider an application, And then sometimes somebody provides more detail than that.
Yeah.
And I think if you're doing this, you might want to clarify that language. I think what the city manager is saying, if you get that kind of someone coming forward with an idea or an intent, that they would like to be notified, not even if it doesn't go to a full application. Am I correct about that?
Well, we, not necessarily, we had thought just if a formal application submitted.
Okay.
But as the gentleman said, we talk with each other all the time, and so they would, they would tell me if there's a notion or an idea or a concept that doesn't make it. But again, we pay EDC a pretty good amount to do this work for us, and we hope that they can do it.
Right.
So, but all it is just a courtesy copy, so we can be in that beginning communication loop that takes place. Since overall it's a city function, the Type B funds.
As Mr. Zanoni said, I mean, this was a weird case. We were literally told by somebody on the outside. We briefed everybody at the city, briefed, knew that there was other meetings ongoing, and then, when it gets to it, it's somebody we deal with all the time. So you used to, imagine if you say, I've talked to such
We'll call it COVID
I take
haze.
you,
It's
I
COVID
take your
haze.
word.
We'll
We're going to make sure we're not going to do that again.
COVID
And
haze.
we're going to make sure, I'm going to speak, me or Mike will personally speak to Peter on.
So the reason I buzzed, though, is because I wanted to clarify, going back to something John said, and just making sure that this is still what y'all are doing. I remember when we first formed Type B, we had lots of long discussions about what it would be and what it wouldn't be. And one of the main issues became that we wanted to be notified of applications, even if they went to the EDC and were turned down. We did not want there to be this, ability for there to be a deep hole there. And I assume that is still the plan.
Yes.
Or in the procedure. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. And that's when it went to the full board. If the full board said, no, we still wanted the chairman and the board to kind of be aware that they had turned it down and why.
Now, we can't stop them from politicking, from going to boards, talking to people, right? Realize that.
Mr. Wilson?
So if I have it right, it just boils down to hit the send button, courtesy copy, when y'all get an application. And do we need to amend this?
Well,
Yes.
I would recommend that you do amend it, just so in case Ian and I and Mike aren't here one day, people will know what the procedure is.
Right.
Yeah. We tried with a concurrence memo, but the EDC didn't think that was appropriate, so we're taking this route.
So I'd like to make a motion that we amend this to say that the city manager and the mayor, if I understand it, will
Right.
be provided a courtesy copy of applications when they are received, when they are completed and received by the EDC.
Well,
Right.
That-
It's the mayor and the council member representative. Isn't that correct? 'Cause
Yeah,
it
the
already
mayor
says
and
city
the-
manager.
Right.
I'm sorry.
The mayor,
Yes.
the mayoral appointee to the EDC Board of Directors,
Right.
that person as well.
So it's the mayor and the mayoral appointees, plural, and the city manager.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll
And are
second
you-
the amended motion.
I'm sorry, were we also going to remove with the concurrence of the city manager?
Yes.
Well,
Section
I
2C?
think that was a recommendation. I don't think that we.
So you don't, that's not in your
that-
motion
that-
intentionally?
Right.
Gotcha, okay.
I mean, I'm
intentionally.
making a motion to amend our current procedures
Section
to
12C.
say that specifically.
12A. And also, there's a mention in 2C. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line. All applicants will be required to provide a courtesy copy of their, it's that same language is repeated in 2C. So,
No, it's just that one section because that, they have to provide it to you.
well, it says right here, there's a line that says it also. I'm just saying there's that same provision is included in another section of the
So you don't want
of the
that.
guidelines.
You just
Do it
want-
both places?
We'll give it to the city manager and the two on our board.
Yeah,
What I
so just
don't-
wherever it is, I
What I don't want
guess.
is any applicant to get confused on who they're turning their application into.
Right. So
It has to
that's-
be clear that they turn it into them. So if there's any language in there that says the applicant has to carbon copy the city, I think it's the EDC's responsibility
Yeah,
to
it says
carbon copy, not the
All
applicant.
applicants provide it.
They need to know that there's one point of contact for this.
And that's section 2. It says all applicants.
Yes.
Yeah, we need
Yeah,
to,
so I was just doing 12.
Okay,
So
but I
Not
was
2,
just
because
raising it's in another
That's
section.
spoken to the applicant.
Leah, for clarity, so you want to scrap the motion that's on the floor and just make a motion to amend only section 12?
I
No, she-
thought
that
all
is
we
her
had was
motion.
an agenda item.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, well, that's the agenda item, which was to recommend the whole changes. You just want to change section 12?
Yes, just section 12. I mean, I don't know.
If we're gonna do that, Leah, I'm totally fine with that, but there were a couple of housekeeping changes that I slipped in here. Is it okay if I track those down and go ahead and
Okay,
do
let
them
me,
too?
let me change my motion. Okay. I amend the motion in the agenda, okay, if you want to consider it that way, to simply change, to do any of the housekeeping items and change the language in 12 to state that a courtesy copy will be provided to the city manager, the mayor, and the mayoral appointees with an S.
And just for clarity,
one
the
appointee.
housekeeping items were to change, the guidelines currently require the EDC to send you notice monthly if there are any applications that are rejected, so we changed that to their quarterly report, since they already make that, so they're not having to report to you twice. And then there was a reference in there to an agreement between the city and the board that we used to do on every agreement, and we stopped doing that, so I just removed the reference.
Well, I don't know about that first one. Now that you bring it up.
If you'd rather them do it monthly, that's what the guidelines currently say, but we changed it to quarterly because Mike's already here quarterly, so we figured he could bring it then.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of leaving a lot of lag time between when it happens. So I don't know that.
If you'd rather he said amend them a monthly, we can remove that one too,
Yeah,
that's fine.
okay, remove that one. And what's the second one?
It's there, we used to have a contract between the city and the board on every single incentive to talk about the city handling the compliance and all of that stuff through the EDC. We've since done a contract with both boards that's blanket for all projects, so we no longer include that agreement, so I just removed reference to it.
Okay, that was.
Okay, so those housekeeping items aren't in the book now, right?
They,
These are ones that you're going to be providing?
they were in the red line, but since
Yeah, we
the red
just
line
can't see 'em.
converted.
So
Yeah,
is
we
there-
can't see
Would there
them.
be anything wrong, do you get the sense, to tabling this and having you bring it back cleaned up next month? Is there any forest fire that we don't know about on
Is
this?
that okay, Peter? Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
I can
might
clean it
be
up.
Cleaner, yeah.
I think that'll be
Yeah.
very helpful.
That's a good
E-
idea.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, because, I mean, first, Scott, if I could, I mean, first of all, there's no motion for Leah to amend,
That's what I kept saying,
okay?
but they
Just
thought
because
so.
it says in the caption, a motion to approve, there's no motion. Her motion is the motion. But it's all over the map. It looks like we just want to incorporate section 12, and then you want to just throw in some housekeeping, but there's no housekeeping in here. So if it's not reflected in a motion, just clean it up and bring it back to us.
Yeah.
Is it time sensitive, Peter? No. Okay.
Okay,
We're fine.
before we entertain a motion to table this, I wanted to see if Mr. Trujillo or Ms. Summers had anything to add.
Well, I'm about a minute delayed stream, but the motion to table is, I'm all in favor of that
Okay,
and bring it back clean.
As am I.
okay.
I'll withdraw my motion and make a motion to table.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to table item 5 and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, motion passes. We're tabling this to further date.
Very good.
Item 6 on the agenda is our fiscal year operating budget for economic development, housing, and streets.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. Eddie Houlihan with the Office of Management and Budget, and we'll see if they can get up 6A. You were passed out a presentation that's a little different from what you received after some one-on-one conversations with the board members. Some projects, items were changed. Basically, we'll talk about it more in a few minutes, but to split it up into 2 years as opposed to all in 1 year. So the first piece here, the economic development piece, is funded with an eighth of a cent sales tax. The economic development portion gets 50% of that eighth of a cent. A small amount of investment income, interest income. And then a transfer, as Ms. Hurlbert mentioned, a transfer from the street to finish paying off we've funded some street projects with economic development dollars. So that's paying that off of 2.5 million. So total revenues projected in economic development of 6,453,000. Expenditures in economic development section, the major business incentive project budgeted in 22 is for Next Sports for $1.2 million. Some administration, $2,500 for that. And then general fund support of a little over 51,000. And this is the change that occurred. The transfer to the park CIP for the ecotourism projects was reduced and split up into 2 years. We have some slides that portray that. So originally it was over 5 million. Today it's 1,932,750 for total expenditures of 3,187,000. And here's the summary of the changes that were made. The contingency amount for the project was reduced from 20% to 15%. The funding for the projects were extended into 2 fiscal years. And the highest priority projects were funded for the first year.
So, Mr. Julian, and sorry to interrupt.
That's all right, go ahead.
I really like when we go through everything together, but, so not only are you presenting the budget today, but you're presenting a proposal for use of that budget through 22 and 23. So it's not just a presentation on the budget, but it's a project being presented to us as well in this budget presentation, right?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
And these next few slides detail the projects. First, Labani Park, I won't go over each one of them individually. We have information on each one individually if you're interested in that. But Labani Park budgeted for $288,000. And then the list of Ocean Drive parks, Ropes, Oleander, Doddridge, for $137,058 and $34,000. And then Swantner, Palmetto, and Ponish for $193,700 for Swantner, $80,000 in projects for Palmetto, and then Ponish, $79,000. And then Cole Park, $276,000. And lastly, some improvements at the 9-hole executive golf course for $500,000. The project totals $1,646,000, and after reimbursements and contingency amounts are added, the total $1,932,750. And these next couple of projects were pushed out to FY 2023. Packery Channel for $1,285,000. The big part being the rebranding landscape construction cost. And then Peary Place Park improvements for $1,393,000. So together with the reimbursements and contingency totaling $3,356,000 in year 2. The next slide is a total of the 2 years. So projects of design, construction, furnishing amounting to $4,331,000, and then admin reimbursements of $383,000, engineering, and then contingency amount of $574,000, for a total for the 2 years of $5,288,750. And just an overview of the economic development. Beginning fund balance expected to be a little over 4.4 million, revenues of 6.4, expenditures of 3,187,000, and an projected ending fund balance at the end of 22 of 7,695,000.
Mr. Houlihan,
Yes, sir.
we have a question from the board.
Okay.
Mr. Vols?
Before we go on to housing, streets, economic development, I'm a little confused. The park projects, they look great, but why are you giving this presentation?
What's the budget? I'm the
Right, I
budget
know that,
director.
but-
That's, we have.
Right, but is somebody gonna follow up on the staff to clean it up? Because there's a lot of good stuff in there, and I wanna make sure that we're all aware of, you know, like that Pierce Park. I mean, that's a great opportunity. So Neiman, I mean, you made a you had us all on Zoom calls, and we went through this, so are you gonna have an opportunity to present each one and the merits of each one?
Yeah.
Or is it just the budget and that's it?
No, yeah, Neiman can go through the merits. Yeah, maybe have Eddie finish the entirety, and then we'll have Neiman come up and
Okay, there's
further
a lot of
explain.
good stuff in there, and I don't
Absolutely.
want it to get
Yeah.
lost somewhere.
We agree.
Just because we're looking at a budget.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
that's a good
Then
idea.
I'm sorry.
Neiman's ready to have to.
Okay.
Okay, thank
When I
you.
finish, you'll come.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And then the housing piece of the type B, this particular area gets 500,000 of sales tax, a very small amount of interest income, and so total revenue is a little over 500,000. In expenditures, affordable housing piece of $1.5 million. That is 500,000 for the Salvation Army and 1 million for some lot purchases and development services permits and fees. And then the amount for the general fund administrative support for this particular fund area, and total expenditures of $1,525,000. And the overview of the housing anticipated to begin the fiscal year '22 with almost $1.5 million in fund balance and revenues of $500,000, expenditures of $1,525,000 for a projected ending fund balance of $466,000. And then the street area gets the remaining piece of the sales tax after the 50% goes to economic development and 500 to housing. So the total projected sales tax in this area is $3,439,000. And the expenditures, 2,000 for admin, transfers out that went to the economic development to finish paying that out. The area of $2,500,000, general fund support of a little over $31,000. In the street project of $1.2 million, we did have $1.2 million left over, and with all the needs we have out there, we decided to use that for a project, and so that project would be right now Elizabeth from Santa Fe to Staples. High-level overview, expected to begin the year with a little over $300,000, revenue of $3.4 million, expenditures of $3.7, and for a small ending fund balance of $4,304. And with that, I'll let Mr. Young come up and go over the projects with you.
Thanks, Mr. Houlihan. I think the board does have some specific questions about the project that's the parks proposal within this budget. So
Just
we'll
for
kind of
clarity,
move from-
Mr. Harris, we've done this before on streets projects as well. This is the budget. The actual project does have to have a public hearing before it's finally approved, so that will come back.
It
at
was
some
on my
point.
questions list, so
Yes,
I'm
so that will-
glad you
as will the
mentioned
street. That will come back for a public hearing.
Okay.
This is just to budget the money so that we know that, so we can get the budget to council in a timely manner.
I'm glad you clarified that. Thanks, Amy. Okay. Yeah, go ahead and,
Thank you, Board and Mr. Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to engage with you all today. I'm Neiman C. Young. I'm the ACM, newest ACM for the city. One of the departments that I am in charge of is the Parks and Recreation Department. However, that's a little bit of a misnomer because what we're asking for is not a parks project. We're not asking for an investment in our parks. Rather, we're asking for the Type B Board to consider an expansion of the partnership that the city has had with the Type Board to invest in our ecosystem and our agritourism across the city. Just because of that partnership alone, by my calculations, we're investing approximately $56 million in different economic hubs across the community. $12 million along the Shoreline Drive Street Project, $20 million in our marina, some significant money in Cole Park and the Bayfront Kiosk and our Marquee Fountain. And then next year, the city is looking at $4.5 million that's going to be invested in the Water Garden Project, and then a potential $19 million in our Packery Channel. Now, this hasn't been done with the city alone. As stated, this has been through a partnership with the Type A Board and we're looking for these projects to be considered an investment in the augmentation and expansion on those investments that we made in our downtown area. If you allow me an opportunity, I could walk through a couple of the projects. Specifically, in Labonte Park, it states that this is a Labonte Park project, but it's not just an investment in Labonte Park. The keynote project in this initiative is our gateway signage. Us being Corpus Christi, being a top 7 city in the state, it's a shame that when you cross over the city's borders into the city of Corpus Christi, tourists can't even tell that they have arrived into Corpus Christi, and they can't delineate what infrastructure that we have invested in to accommodate tourists and customers coming into the Corpus Christi. So we're simply asking for $116,000 to create that signage that basically elevates our city and gives our city the recognition that it deserves when tourists enter into our community. In addition to the signage, we're looking at placing signage at Labonte Park and installing a kayak launch pad and signage along the Nueces River to basically augment that great facility in Labonte Park.
Sir, what kind of monument are you talking about?
Yes, sir. This would be our gateway monument. We're looking for doing some designs on the facility, but basically we want something that's very prominent, and it shows like when you enter into, say, Dallas or into Houston or Austin, you have signage that's prominent. It's very high class and elevated, and it shows, hey, welcome to Austin, and it includes a tagline for people to remember, and attracts, basically it contributes to the branding of the community.
You know that we tried that one time already. The Convention Visitor Bureau built a office there for people coming through there, and if they had any questions about Corpus Christi, they were welcoming them there. And down the line, it just, before you knew it, it was vacated and deteriorated. It had to be torn down.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I definitely understand, if that initiative has been tried before, but understandably so, this is a whole new community under new leadership, under new practices, and basically Corpus Christi is, the landscape of Corpus Christi has changed significantly when compared to what was done 5 years, 10 years, even 1 year ago. So I really believe that we need to keep up with best practices that are being conducted by our peer cities in the top 10 cities in the state. And those practices include marquee gateway signage, welcoming those individuals into their communities. And right now, Corpus Christi is lacking.
Yeah, I remember that. Are you thinking then maybe somewhere near the Nueces River, somewhere closer to that entrance? Because if you put it too far back in the park, that 37 traffic's going to miss it. So
Yes.
you almost need an archway or something there. Just got to be careful where you put it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and that's TxDOT property
Yes,
too.
sir.
That's a
We
good point.
definitely had conversations about TxDOT right away, and we definitely want to target a prominent area where it is being witnessed by, the intertraffic traffic. So it's not going to be inside of the park itself. We want to be prominent, and naturally, if that requires, discussions with TxDOT, we have those communications, we have those relationships with those agencies, and I'm sure that we can work out, some type of understanding so we can get the branding and the signage that we need to promote Corpus Christi.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. That then takes us to our next project.
Sorry, I have,
Okay. Ms. Summers has a question for you, Mr. Young.
Yes, ma'am.
so sorry. One of the questions that we had when we did speak on the WebEx was, what kind of specifications do you have for these monuments? I mean, $72,000, $116,000. These are somewhat specific numbers, and to me, I'm just concerned. Do we have specifications and estimates on what these are going to cost? What are we looking at investing these funds towards, design-wise? Have we gotten any? We spoke about maybe getting some of the ideas that y'all were thinking about proposing forward. Do you have any of that with you today?
We don't have those cost estimates with us today. That is something that we're working on. Admittedly, that we had conversations with, or we had that request for information 4 or 5 days ago. Naturally, that's not enough time for a turnaround on that request, but I can assure you that we are doing our diligence to ensure that we do have those cost estimates. So when it does come back before the Type B board, all the information will be readily available, and we can ensure that that diligence is met.
All right, and then secondly, on the Labonte Park, on the entry monument and the kayak launch and the signage and development and installation fees, there is a fund within the Community Enrichment Fund to support regional parks. And those funds have to be used within a 5-mile radius of the development that was put in. With all the development that's gone in Calallen, shouldn't those funds go towards these fees?
So we definitely had looked at different funding streams for these requests. That includes the American Rescue Fund. We looked at perhaps funding some of these projects through Bond 2020, and we didn't find them fitting, or naturally other priorities took precedence. In addition, we took a look at the Community Enrichment Fund, and here's our challenge. The city of Corpus Christi has 191 parks in its inventory. So, and as you all are fully aware, the city is currently working on our update to our 10-year Parks and Recreation Master Plan, with approximately $6 million going, in the Community Enrichment Fund. We're going to have to take care of those other 184 parks that are in the inventory that's not included in this proposal. Obviously, if we're asking for $5.5 million just to take care of these parks that we feel have the most economic impact on the city, you see that it doesn't go far. $6 million in Community Enrichment Fund that you're trying to spread across the needs of 180 plus parks is really going to exhaust that fund. So that's why we're coming to the Type B board, again, looking for that partnership and that investment. Let's take care of the investment in these regional parks that basically drive the economic turning for the city, and then we utilize the Community Enrichment Fund to take care of those community parks and those parks that really don't contribute to, the economic impact of the city.
Well, I guess my question is that $6 million, the last accounting that the Builders Association received was $6 million about 2 years ago. And so we've had to fund those 184 parks for the past 2 years. That $6 million is used to help grow our regional parks. Why aren't we using it? We've been able to fund them currently. I guess I'm confused as to why the community enrichment funds weren't needed for the 184 parks in the past 2 years, but they are needed now, where this is a prime place to invest and expand these regional parks with those funds.
The reason why there really hasn't been a very transparent and deliberate process is because of legacy leadership. As stated, we have, new city management, we have new park directors, we have a new executive leadership team. And one thing that we identified is the fact that we do need to have that deliberate and transparent process in place so we can properly employ CEF funds. We 100% agree that the Community Enrichment Fund should not be a piggy bank. It should be actively engaged and employed into taking care of our community parks. And that's something that we're working very closely with the Innovative Office, Development of Services Department, the Parks and Recreation Department, and the Finance Department. We literally are meeting bi-weekly, trying to unravel that onion, trying to figure out, okay, here's the money that comes in, what's the process, ensuring that is communicated to all the different departments that are impacted, and more importantly, how does this money go out? Who determines that this is the priority and this is where each dollar is going to be invested in? And we want to have that discussion not only with our internal departments, but that's a discussion that we believe should be had with the builders community as well. So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and basically drain the Community Enrichment Fund on regional parks and basically leave the stakeholders out of the conversation and then leave our community parks underfunded.
I think go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, Ms. Summers, before we go any further on kind of specific questions of each of the portions of these projects, I think this is a budget presentation, first and foremost. I think that what I'm hearing, the multiple different questions from the board members, I'd like to possibly entertain a motion that we move to accept the operating budget minus this project and come back at a later time and maybe in a workshop environment to possibly collaborate a little bit more, get all these questions answered. It seems like we're moving very quick on a very important but special project. I don't want to forget this, but I don't want to get too far. This is a budget presentation, so I think that if we were to accept the budget today and come back with a workshop or something that we can go into detail and ask these questions that the board has about these specific projects, I think that'll be a better use of our time today. We know that the budget has to be approved, the operating budget for the city. We didn't have a meeting last month. We have to get this done this month. I think this is a special project that has to be considered separately. We consider projects every single month, type B projects. We can hear this at any time in the future. That's what I would like to see if any of the board members would like to entertain a motion to approve that. Ms. Olivari.
I'll move.
Second.
Can you turn your mic on, Leah?
Yeah, it's, for me, it's the whole parks discussion and it's the affordable housing discussion. So I would say, could we approve the budget, but as you suggested, come back in a workshop setting to talk about the specific projects in both of those. Now, when it comes to streets, that's really the council's decision and not ours. But so we would adopt what Eddie put forward in terms of income or revenue and not specify the capital improvements or expenditures other than those that we've already adopted in prior meetings. And I would.
I'm going to piggyback on that.
John, your mic.
I'm sorry. If we're going to do something like that, I'd like to see an alternate budget that has the funding, but not for these park projects. I mean, how would that look, dollar-wise, if these parks were not included in this budget?
Well, it just takes.
It's a line item.
I mean, it's a line item.
I know that, but
yeah.
I'd like to see that.
Oh, you want to see other suggestions?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, if we could shake it out down the road, I'm fine with that too, but I agree with you. I mean, I think we need to,
This is a little quick.
yeah.
I don't want to in any way, I don't want you all to get the impression that this is not needed. I think we all know that this is super important to our community to do this, including the other 190-something parks, whatever it is. All of that is important for the community. I just think today is a budget discussion, and this specific project or series of projects, as we're calling it, is meant for a different conversation, similar to any other request that we have through the Type B board. It's just meant for another conversation. I'm sorry. It's just, that's why I questioned at the very beginning if it was all lumped into one. I wish it weren't. I wish it were, it would have been a lot easier if it were, if we had a budget presentation and then we had a project presentation as well. But anyway, so with the motion, are we clear on the motion?
I'm not clear.
I'm
So
not.
by approving that motion-
I'm not clear, Scott.
Okay,
Comment.
let's clear up the motion.
You seconded it.
Ms.
Okay.
Olivari.
So basically, my motion is that we take the revenues and the already approved expenditures, and we consider that the budget, and that we leave the parks just in the balance without specificity to the project, and the same when it comes to affordable housing at this point. And we come back and review those projects.
So comment, please,
Second.
Scott.
Scott.
Yes,
Lee.
Lee, go ahead, Lee.
So, Leah, so are you recommending that the transfer to the park fund of $5 million be deleted from this budget?
At this time,
Yes, and so it
I just would leave
it'll
that
just
in the
increase
balance of the
fund
fund,
balance.
yes, at this time.
And just a general comment, and, you know, I mentioned this earlier
You just leave it
in
at
our,
this,
in
right?
our preliminary meeting with Mr. Young. I'm not in favor in general to include park allocations from type B funds. I don't see the connection. We have a lot of EDC projects that we hope are coming forth that will bring some payroll dollars to the city. So I'm in general not in favor of using type B funds for park projects. One question I had, Neiman, and I'm not sure who can answer this, but we have some parks, and I'll just give you an example, Swantner. Swantner Park is a beautiful footprint that is in the Ocean Drive setting. And I'm not sure what kind of deed restrictions are, but is there any way possible to put that out there for development and utilize those funds to provide funding for all our park projects? And it could be that there's a deed, someone donated the land, 50 years ago or 60 years ago, and that's not possible. But it sure would be exciting to see what kind of development could be made on Swantner Park. We have one bench and one shade area, and basically it's used for fishing. But that is a huge footprint that's in the most beautiful part of our city that could be developed and could be made something amazing by people who are in the development business.
So, Mr. Trujillo, just for the record, sale of parks is actually a pretty complicated issue. It typically requires an election and a long process.
we could
so
bring it
it wouldn't
before the
be
voters,
it
of
wouldn't be an
course.
immediate thing that would
No,
cover for this year.
I understand that, but I mean, that's something we could take to the voters and say, hey, we're gonna develop this or propose developing it and utilizing those funds to improve all our other parks.
And
Well, Perry
And by all
Place,
means,
Perry
that
Place
should
is
be
another one.
for
Yeah.
the city.
And this
For
is
the
why I
voters.
think we need a workshop on this, because there's so many ideas. I think it can be in collaboration with your master planning process that's going on. I fully support that and think that that's probably where we can get a workshop together. If there's a request for B funds and using eco, kind of on the ecotourism, for ecotourism purposes like this, I think a workshop, part of the master planning process, we can work out, all these different ideas in that type of environment rather than in a budget discussion. So that's why I'm asking this.
So can I make one other statement? Because I've heard over the last week 2 or 3 times, and I want to clarify something. The Type B board did not fund the, lighthouse for the apartments, La Vista Point. That was not the motion, and that's not what we funded. We funded infrastructure, water, and wastewater, and I clarified that recently. So it was physical infrastructure necessary to support the development of
Yeah.
those.
And
I
we had
just
an-
want to, I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
sitting up here, because people think that we funded the lighthouse.
We had an
and that
equally
was-
long discussion about the
Yes.
lighthouse project, and we
Right.
specified that it can only be whatever money from the B funds
going
were
physical.
specific.
Yes.
So I guess you're bringing that up because that's another, say, entry gateway, ecotourism type thing, but it wasn't that. It was for infrastructure, which,
Just in case you were, because somebody else said to me, oh, well, y'all funded the lighthouse, and I said, no, we didn't.
yeah. So I want to, I think we have a motion and a second. I'd like to call for votes at this time.
Can you clarify the motion, please?
Can we make clear the motion?
So my understanding is to adopt, well, I guess you can, but to adopt the budget, including revenues and already appropriated expenditures. We're going to remove the funding related to parks and affordable housing, right? Projects as well. And the only thing I was going to, for discussion in a workshop,
Yes.
did you want to add that? Okay, for discussion in a workshop. That's the motion.
Okay, so those dollars, we're not changing any of the math. The dollars are basically placeholders at this point.
They're just staying in
Right.
fund balance
Right,
at this point,
right.
just like we always
They're
do.
not tied to a project now at this point.
Um,
Okay, fine.
And Mr. Chair, you said the parks and the affordable housing?
That's the motion on the table.
Those
yes.
dollar amounts. those dollar amounts.
Can we have a discussion about the affordable housing before that decision is made?
Sure, but let me tell you what our problem is. We've been trying to get a workshop for 6 months on affordable housing, and today was the first time, or the last week was when I read about this plan. It sounds like a great plan, but again, I think we're under this kind of time thing, and it was before you got here,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Young. So I'm not faulting anybody, and it's been a crazy time, but I just think we ought to have a session and talk about what is your plan in more detail than the clock ticking towards 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Yes, ma'am. But it is an agenda. It's the following agenda item on the
Right.
on the agenda.
I thought it was also, though, in the budget. It is.
It is.
It is in the budget as well. So I'm going to cut to the chase and say, yeah.
Okay.
So we have a motion
But-
on the table and a second. We were getting a clarification on that.
I want to make sure that the staff is clear also, because they look like they're not as clear as we aren't either.
Yeah, let's clear up the motion.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
want me to
what-
restate it,
the
or?
dollar amount stays the same. They're just placeholders. They're not tied to
No.
parks or housing projects.
Leah, as a note on the affordable housing, Mr. Houlihan mentioned that it's 1.5 and that 500 has already been committed. So you just want to delete the 1.
I'm saying
I just wanna
anything
make
that
sure
has
we have
not
the-
already been
Yeah.
committed.
We just want to make sure we
okay?
have the clear motion, that we're not making
Right.
both of those 0.
Right, no. We have committed projects that we have voted on before. We would leave, at this point, in the fund balances, the money y'all have recommended for parks in excess of $5 million over 2 years, okay? By the way, that amounts to 75% of all the money coming into Type B over the next 2 years, just as a note. And in the affordable housing, the same. So it's just, we're not putting those in the capital improvement or the program at this point until we have a workshop. Does that make sense? Mr. Young's still looking at me a little confused, or maybe a little disturbed.
No, I just thought that maybe before making like you say, you just want to do a coverall before you even get to the next agenda item. Perhaps the Type B board would allow the staff an opportunity to provide some rhyme, reason, and logic behind the affordable housing. I think that it would be.
The way you did this motion, I'm going to pass it before I even hear about it. So at this point, this is my option, essentially.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay.
Does anybody need clarification on this? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, the motion passes.
Okay, and you need to pass it as amended, the budget as
And the
amended.
motion passes as amended.
Okay, but it's a separate vote, I'm sorry.
Oh, so we did, okay.
So that was the amendment, and now we have to approve the budget as amended.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the budget as amended?
So move.
Okay, we have a
Second.
motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I do hope we invest in our parks, I really do. Public hearing, so I'm going to call this the regular meeting to adjournment right now and open up a public hearing. Is that how I do this?
What you just said, we're not going to adjourn, it's part of the meeting, so
Okay.
if you could just read the caption, staff will make their presentation, and then you can open the public hearing, sir.
Okay. So our public hearing, we have a motion authorizing a 2-year agreement with the city of Corpus Christi provide Type B affordable housing funding in the amount of $1,250,000 for costs related to infill housing incentive program. And we'll start our public hearing with a staff presentation.
Can I just request something? Because it's very confusing to me that these agenda items start with motion, and that's just confusing. It's very presumptuous. Should be a recommendation authorizing a 2-year agreement, not a motion, because that's confusing.
Okay.
Makes it seem like there's already a motion out there, so.
Yeah, we put the recommended motion language in the caption so that the board has that in front of them when they review. If you'd prefer, we can call it discussion and then put the recommended motion, but it's mostly to identify which ones are motions and which ones are resolutions, and this is our
Well,
recommendation.
discussion with possible action to authorize.
We did used to have it listed that way, and we got a request from the board to add the motion because they didn't want to have to
Yeah.
write it on the floor, because I was over here writing on the floor.
We're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, so let's get our staff presentation on this right now. Thank you, ma'am.
We get the slides for item 7. Or is it in here? Item 7.
Ms. Buxton, it doesn't appear that they have that one. The control room. Do you have a hard copy?
It's,
Oh, is it on there? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. I asked them.
thank you. Mhm.
We're not getting it.
Okay, they said they found it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the item, hi, I'm Jennifer Buxton. I'm with Neighborhood Services. The item before you is the authorizing agreement for the infill housing incentive program. Can I get the next slide, please? This program has been authorized by the City of Corpus Christi since December 2015. It was intended to meet specific goals, which included providing decent, affordable housing, assisting in the development of abandoned or non-conforming vacant lots, expanding the local tax base, revitalizing existing neighborhoods, and reducing code enforcement abatement expenses. The program can only be used in community development block grant areas, and those are areas where there's at least 51% of the residents are low to moderate income persons. And then the program hasn't been updated in 6 years, so it was requested that we take a look at this program. Can I get the next slide, please? So the original program was incredibly difficult to use because it limited the sales price of the homes to $100,000. But there were a couple of things and the original incentives included waiving building permits, platting fees, and zoning fees, waiving water, wastewater, gas tap fees, and providing 2 roll-off containers at the city expense. Can I have the next slide, please? So we revised the program guidelines and had these approved by City Council in June. But there were a couple of things that we had to take under consideration, is the funding for the program. There has never been a line item in the general fund budget for this, and with the fee waivers that would have been enterprise funds and income generating funds that we're having to take up the expenses for the program. So what we did is we went from a fee waiver to a reimbursement program. We're maintaining the eligible expenses that included building permit fees, tap fees, platting, zoning fees, and other costs, but we're including eligible expenses that include demolition, water, wastewater infrastructure, and street improvements. And we're allowing developers or builders, owners to go up to $25,000 of eligible expenses. Next slide, please. The other thing we did is we removed the maximum size limit, and we included the provisions that make it eligible for Type B funding. In order for a home ownership program to be eligible for Type B funding, there are 4 requirements that the project has to meet. There has to be a limit on the sales price. Buyers have to be income limited to 80% or below the area median income. We either have to put a recapture provision or a resale provision on the developed unit. And then there's an environmental requirement that says we have to meet the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code. The City of Corpus Christi is at 2015, so we did not address that in these program guidelines. And then city staff will manage the administrative requirements to qualify the home buyers. So if there's a builder, he has to sell to somebody that's at or below 80% area median income, the city staff will make that qualification for the builder. Next slide, please. The income limits, again, were limited to those who are at 80% or below the area median income. For a family of 4, that's $55,450. Next slide, please. An estimated budget, we have not asked for a line item budget, but this is what the budget may look like. We are asking for $250,000 out of FY21 funds for the first year and for FY '22 for $1 million. Next slide, please. So our next steps would be to approve the motion authorizing a 2-year agreement with the city for $1.25 million. Again, those dollar amounts are $250 out of the FY '21 budget and $1 million out of the FY 2022 budget. Staff would undertake an education and outreach campaign to realtors, home builders, and home buyers. And then the staff would then pre-qualify potential home buyers. May I have the next slide, please? And again, this program is only available in the CDBG block group areas, and you can see the green squares. And again, those are areas where the block has 51% of the folks that reside there are low to moderate income individuals. And that's my presentation.
Okay, at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Are there any comments from the public on this item? Okay. Seeing no comments from the public hearing is now officially closed. So at this time, there's up for board discussion and a vote. So any discussion on this item?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, Ms. Wilson.
I agree with Ms. Olivari. I think I'd like to see this housing project go to a workshop in reviewing the guidelines. I guess I just have some questions and concerns over them that I feel like we could tighten them a little bit. One of my first questions is it discusses construction of new residential housing units, maybe built on site a vacant lot or on 2 non-conforming lots by replatting through an administrative plat to remove the lot line. Is there a reason why the replatting wouldn't have to go through P&Z and City Council, that it could just be approved administratively?
Any replatting of the lots would still have to follow city procedures. This does not eliminate the responsibility of the builder, owner, or developer to go through standard city procedures. This just allows those expenses to be reimbursed.
Okay, but it does say replatting through an administrative plat.
Sorry, what's that? Can you please repeat that?
It does state replatting through an administrative plat in the definition. And so my understanding is if it was just approved, then it wouldn't have to go through planning and zoning.
Can you please tell me what section you're in?
Section 3 definitions. It's the last sentence.
I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. I see what you're looking at.
Okay. Okay. And then on the incentives, the incentives have been expanded to include water and wastewater infrastructure and street improvements. Those seem more tailored to developers than builders. They're not going to necessarily have a major impact on the construction of one home, but maybe several lots of land.
Because we're talking about infill. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Could
Go-
you repeat the question?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
So I guess from a developer's understanding, I'd like to see some pro rata wording around this, where if a developer went in and found a piece of land in these block groups that could be subdivided into 20 RS 4.5, but only 5 of them met these housing infill guidelines, I just don't want to, I would like to see that a pro rata share of these wastewater and street expenses that would go to maybe such a project I'd like to have some wording around that in here as well.
Okay, we can take a look
then
at
I
that,
think-
but I do want to reiterate that this has to be done in the CDBG eligible areas. So those tracts of land are not necessarily probable.
Well, some of these tracts of land are currently city parks that are several acres that are highlighted on this map that was provided to us. And so I think that's part of my concern here is, some of these parks are close to 9 acres. If a developer went in and didn't have to go through planning and zoning and could develop those 9 acres into multiple housing units, I would want to make sure that they're either all, if they're getting the full 25,000 per developed unit, it's at a pro rata share of the whole project's cost. And so I think that's some of the areas that I'd like to have more of a workshop on so we can drill down on these. I also pulled some of the infill housing in some of the other municipalities in Texas, and I also feel like maybe there should be some language in here about, builders being up to date on their property taxes or having, free of liens on their properties in order to qualify for the program as well. More to just show that they have the financial ability to complete these projects if they're reserving these funds ahead of time.
I understand what you're saying there regarding free of liens. One of the things we were going for is because it's a reimbursement, they can reserve the funding, but they get no reimbursement unless they have built it and sold it to an income qualified buyer and met all of the requirements. So there's no need to have a clawback. So if they do not have the financial wherewithal to complete the house, then they don't receive any of the 25. The other thing that we weighed is trying to have a program that was not an administrative burden or had a reason for builders to not participate. And one of the conversations we had, many of the conversations that we had, was how do we make this as easy as possible for people to use in order to get the outcome we wanted, which was homeownership opportunities for low-income people. So as we looked at qualifying builders, that was what we took under consideration.
And I think builders agree with you. They don't want to get tied down into the administrative details of everything. I just think there needs to be some clarity around some of these things in the program. I think it's a good program. I'd just like to see things more clearly defined. And I think that there should be a workshop with some of these builders that are currently doing infill housing, and how can we incentivize them to build more, to construct, utilize more of these infill lots.
Ms. Summers,
and
I think what we need to do is, I think all of this is kind of leading towards an affordable housing workshop. So I think with respect to this program, with this agreement here, what is the next action if we already disapproved the budget on it?
We just didn't put it in the budget yet.
Yeah, if you were to approve this item, you would have to then amend the budget you just approved to add the money back in.
Yeah, so,
so could we table it until we have a workshop on this?
yeah. So this is another item for tabling. So do I hear a motion to table?
Yes.
Yes, make a motion to table this.
Second.
Diane made the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to table this item until further date. We'll have our workshop. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no? Okay. Thank you. Okay, item J on the agenda is executive director comments. Do we have any comments right now from the city manager?
The only, I don't know if Constance has anything, but we are working on an application for economic development funding, specifically related to the university Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi. Just to let you know, I know I've heard some of the comments from the board members. And the manager, the mayor and myself are going to meet with Ian. We received a briefing from the president of the university, Dr. Miller, and we'll meet with Ian next, and then that item will be placed on the agenda in the near future for this board.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, with that, I see no further business. This meeting is adjourned. Can we get about 5 minutes to do a bio break, and we'll, let's all be back at 15 after. We'll start the